drive this car, get used to that. You want to close the doors, you got to act like you hate them. You join me inside the cabin of the 2019 Mercedes-AMG G63, easily one of the most unnecessary and yet wonderful vehicles on sale. Let's start with the exterior. It's an all-new generation of the G-Class, and it brings with it some of the biggest changes in the vehicle's 40-year history. But from the outside, it just looks like the same old G-Wagon, and I think that's a good thing. It's still tall, it's still boxy, it still has a rear tire carrier. But Mercedes-Benz has softened the look a little bit. So the nose has a slight curve to it. The traditional round headlights have this trick LED border to them. The windows have curved edges now, kind of in the same way that the new Wrangler does it. And this being the AMG model, it has additional visual muscle, like big 22-inch matte black wheels, the slotted Panamericana chrome grille, the classic dual side exit exhaust that looks so freaking awesome, I can't even handle it. It all comes together really nicely as a bridged gap between the heritage, the classic, and the new, the contemporary. Mercedes did a great job with that. Inside, the changes aren't as subtle. So while it still has the upright dashboard that the G-Class has always had, it's now completely modern Mercedes-Benz. You've got this pair of 12.3-inch digital displays, the brushed metals, the turbine air vents, the knurled finishes for the switchgear on the center stack, a wood grain trim, and this Napa leather seating. Oh, and of course, the Burmeister coolest freaking speaker covers on the planet. This model also goes a bit further. The one I have here has the quote-unquote exclusive interior package, which basically means more Napa leather for the dashboard and heated, ventilated, and massaging front seats. Worth every penny, in my opinion. It's like a $7,000 package, but when you're paying $148 grand for a vehicle, what's another $7,000 to have your butt massaged at a moment's notice? But more so than the upgraded quality of the interior is the added space of the new G-Class. So it's riding on a 1.6-inch longer wheelbase, and the width has grown 4.8 inches. Mercedes has then maximized that on the inside. So front passengers have an additional 1.6 inches of legroom. Rear passengers get 5.5 inches of extra legroom. That tells you what they were working with on the last G-Class, a vehicle that I didn't like all that much, largely because the inside was so cramped. The new one though, the length and the width that have been added are used to make a slightly larger door opening and much more space in the back seats. You're not going to be able to stretch out like you're in an S-Class, but you do feel like you have enough space, and the width really comes into play, so 3 adults can sit wide back there, not having any problems. Cargo capacity is good. It's not abundant, and the rear seats, while they do fold flat from a 2 configuration, there's a ledge behind them, so you can never press cargo all the way in. You're going to have this little lip that you have to go over. It'll be plenty for all of your grocery getting needs. I only have a few small issues with this cabin. The first is material quality in a couple places, like the window switch configuration here. All really high-end materials surrounding it, and then some very cheap toggle controls on something you see and use every day. I don't understand that one. The second one, not as big of a deal because it's not so visible, but the backing for this center console, lovely leather, and then really hard, cheap plastic. The steering wheel controls, you have these nice knurled selectors down below, and then these smartphone style haptic touch feedback controllers that I like the way they're configured, where the left one controls the driver instrument cluster and the right one controls the center infotainment. But the way they actually work is about 50% success rate. So you're swiping along and it's working, and then it just stops working. And you're still going, and then like a few seconds later, it'll continue to work. So something that only works 50% of the time, just use a physical control on it. I get it, you're trying to be innovative, you're trying to cut down clutter, but it doesn't work, so figure something else out. The infotainment, Mercedes-Benz's command unit, is by the automaker's own rule book, now outdated because they have this new MBUX module. The displays are still vivid and they're fairly responsive, but the menu structure is too convoluted. MBUX solves that. It's so much more intuitive. I don't know why they didn't incorporate that into the new G-Class when it's offered on the new base A-Class. Those few gripes aside, the exterior and the interior certainly seem to match the price tag. So all we have to do now is take it for a spin and see if the driving experience matches up too. The last generation G63 was in no way light on potency. It had a 5.5 liter twin turbo V8 that made 563 horsepower. The new one though, it one-ups it with a 4.0 liter twin turbo V8 that makes 577 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque. Granted, that is moving a vehicle that weighs 5,750 pounds, but it's still so much motor, and it's connected to a 9-speed multi-clutch automatic transmission and all-wheel drive system that get this big, unaerodynamic bad boy moving awfully quick. Car and Driver got a 0 to 60 time of 3.9 seconds for this thing. While that may not be as fast as the same engine put in the AMG GT supercar, that is just crazy for a vehicle of this size and weight. And it feels every bit that fast from behind the wheel. You wouldn't think it, but something this shape can be downright fun. So much fun. And it's got the brakes to match too. They hold this bad boy down pretty darn well. This being the AMG model, it's also fitted with an adaptive suspension system that can stiffen or soften the ride depending on what you're doing. It's also got some sticky tires from Goodyear. They keep it fairly well planted in the corner, certainly better than you might expect. But this isn't really a corner car where at some point the traction control system does go, what the heck are you doing, man? You're in a big burly SUV, stop it. But it does corner fairly well. And now that it doesn't have the circulating ball steering system, it has a traditional rack and pinion with electronic assistance. The steering feel is actually quite good. The heft increases as you work your way through the drive modes. There's an individual setting where you can recalibrate the steering, independent from the shift timing, the throttle response, and the damping. Or you can go into comfort mode and everything's relaxed. Sport and then Sport Plus for your extreme handling and power. But yeah, the steering is pretty darn good. I get a fair amount of feedback. Certainly better than the last generation G. Listen to the noise this thing makes too. Oh, baby. Gosh, it sounds good. It's louder than the last G63, that's for sure. This is just such a great engine. Now, every time you do that, you're reminded of how soon you're going to have to visit the fuel station, because Mercedes-AMG quotes this at 14 combined MPG, but I've been seeing 9.8. 9.8. My 6,500 pound Land Cruiser with a rooftop tent on the top of it, making it oh so unaerodynamic, gets 11. This gets 9.8. How I've been driving. I've been driving it crazy fast. I've actually been spending quite a bit of time on the highway, but that's pretty bad. You're going to be making frequent trips to the gas station in this bad boy. But you've got $148,000 to spend on it. You've got the money to pay for the fuel bill. Beyond the immense potency of this engine, the driving experience is really pretty nice. Even though it still has the solid rear axle and ladder frame chassis, it now has an independent front suspension that helps ride quality substantially. Also, the longer wheelbase helps in that regard. So cruising about, really not so bad. When you put the suspension in its softest settings, you can still feel the road imperfections because it's an AMG model. It's a little stiff, but not in any way that's really going to be upsetting as a daily driver. It's a comfortable cruiser. I love the fact that it's a box with windows, so I can see everywhere around me. There aren't really any blind spots to speak of. As far as the drive goes, the only real complaints I have is this annoying whistle that I get from this driver's side window. Even with it fully raised, it's got a high-pitched squeal to it. And if you crack it a little bit, the tone softens, but it's still there. And who wants to drive around with a cracked window all the time? This is a brand new vehicle. It's not a pre-production model. That shouldn't happen. The other one is kind of unavoidable, but the turning radius blows. It's really very bad. You're gonna have to three-point turn, all the things that you really think you should just be able to do in one swoop. I imagine if the squealing wind noise was gone from this window, it would be pretty quiet in here. You've got dual pane glass and all the other improvements Mercedes-Benz has done to make the cabin isolated. And it's not so large that you won't be able to park it. You've got a surround view camera system, so you can easily negotiate your way into tighter parking spots. It's just like driving a big SUV with a stupidly powerful engine. Oh, fudge. Okay. Got real close to its top speed right there, which is 137 miles per hour. Or 149 if you get the AMG package, which is like $2,000 extra, and just makes no sense. You don't need to go 150 miles an hour in a thing this shape. You don't need to, but you might want to. Oh man, that freaking noise, I could do it all day. Great for scaring people as you're driving by them. Really, like, I can't think of many things better. Sorry. No, I'm not. And this being a G-Wagon, I would be remiss not to mention its off-road capability. So even though it doesn't have an air suspension to raise and lower it, it does have 9.7 inches of ground clearance. It's got 3 locking differentials, front, center, and rear, so getting stuck won't really be a problem. Tires might be your limiting factor there, but certainly not the spinning of wheels. There's also 3 off-road modes: sand, gravel, and rock, I think. I can't remember, I don't know. But they basically adjust the traction control system based on your chosen terrain. Clearly, the G63 is a very unique vehicle, but people are still going to cross-shop it against things. So if you're looking at performance SUVs, you might also consider the BMW X5M, which starts at just a little over $100,000. It has 567 horsepower. It does 0 to 60 a little faster than this in 3.8 seconds. And it gets slightly better fuel economy. But really, if you're looking at kind of a direct-ish competitor to this, that's going to be the Range Rover, and specifically the SV Autobiography Dynamic with its 550 horsepower, 5-liter supercharged V8. It costs $174,000, so a little chunk more than this one, but really it's going to come down to like the power and capability that you get from that compared to the power and capability of this one. They're fairly comparable. Oh, that guy likes the G-Class. Yeah, they're fairly comparable vehicles, so you can definitely see how someone might lean over to that Range Rover, especially because the ride quality in that is noticeably better than this with its air suspension, at least for as long as the air suspension lasts before it breaks down and you have to pay for a whole new setup. So if you're asking me how I would spend my $150,000 on an ultra unique, highly capable, very luxurious SUV, I think I'd buy this. I'm serious. This thing is so special in everything that it does. You look like a freaking celebrity when you're driving around. The engine noise is unbelievably good. It's actually kind of fun to drive, both in the truckish bounciness that you have of it and also the way it just accelerates so freaking fast. And it's just something that you leave in the parking lot. It doesn't fit in with all the other cars you see there, and there's this sense of pride that you have going out to drive your G-Class. Do you necessarily need the 63? No, maybe not. I mean, the standard V8 in the G550 is plenty powerful, but if you want the engine note, and you want to just put a smile on your own face and all the other faces of people who might come with you, it's going to be the 63. I think Mercedes has done a wonderful job with the latest generation of this. They've kept the heritage of the G-Wagon while moving it successfully into the modern era. Now more of that engine noise, huh? Oh yeah.